Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would look at this video that I thought would be very particularly interesting. And this is going to be over the conversation of the Terence Bud Crawford and Gervonta Davis alleged possibility of happening, or, the alleged fights that had the possibility of happening. I pretty much knew that this fight was never going to happen because it just makes no sense. Now I know that it would probably make a lot of money because both Terence Bud Crawford and Gervonta Davis, they're two of the biggest stars within that of the whole entire sport, and they're both exceptionally skilled. But at the end of the day, Gervonta Davis, he is around a natural 135 pounder. Maybe if you wanted to reach and stretch it and say that he could reach 140, you could, but he wouldn't really be a natural 140 pounder, especially with his height and reach. He would kind of be like that of a Canelo Alvarez within that of the super middleweight division. And if you moved up to the welterweight division, it will basically be like when Canelo Alvarez tried to fit within that of the light heavyweight division. He would be a couple of weight classes out of his natural realm, at least when you talk about his natural build and especially his height and reach. But the thing is about Gervonta Davis to me is that he just talks a little bit too much overall for my liking. And don't get me wrong, I'm not really a person that has a problem with trash talking. I think that at times that it can bring a little bit more color to that of the sport, a little bit more entertainment and hype up a fight. But at the end of the day, Gervonta Davis, and I'm not saying that this is completely his fault because he was asked this, I believe, by that of the Breakfast Club or whichever interviewees ended up asking them the question. And they said, what would end up happening if you ended up fighting Terence Bud Crawford? And Gervonta Davis, of course, with his regular answer, said overall that he would knock Terence Bud Crawford out. He said that that he doesn't have a chin. And it's no offense against Gervonta Davis, but for as little as he's accomplished at this point in time in his career, Gervonta Davis, before he starts talking about other boxers like that of Terence Bud Crawford or other fighters of a sort, even like Shakur Stevenson or Devin Haney, you need to get in the ring with someone that can actually box. Now, don't get me wrong, Gervonta Davis is a very exceptional fighter. He's very skilled. He's a great athlete. But at the end of the day, the best and most talented fighter that you've ever fought in your career has been Ryan Garcia, a guy that's never won a legitimate belt in his career, and a guy that, let's be real, had more faults than we could probably name positives, at least for counting him with elite caliber level fighters. It just is what it is. But Boxing Ego is going to talk about this. He's going to talk about the potentiality of the Terence Bud Crawford and Gervonta Davis fight. Let's tune in.
Names that's been mentioned by the media: Gervonta Davis, Jermell Charlo, and Jerron Ennis. Which one of those three fights are the most realistic?
Well, for those of you that didn't hear the interviewer, he asked Steven Espinoza, who of course is a Showtime promoter. He asked him which of the three fights are more realistic because there's been conversations about Jermell Charlo, Gervonta Davis, and Jerron Ennis because, of course, now Terence Bud Crawford, he is with that of the PBC. And there's also been conversations about Canelo Alvarez and, Tim Tszyu. Which fight do I think is the most realistic for Mr. Terence Bud Crawford? I think that Jermell Charlo or Tim Tszyu, more than likely, or the Errol Spence Jr. rematch is probably going to be the most realistic. Now, if he ended up fighting Keith Thurman next or something of a sort like that, I wouldn't be surprised at all. I think that if we're talking about the three more than likely fights of Terence Bud Crawford, I think we're talking about Keith Thurman. I think we're talking about Errol Spence Jr., the rematch. I think we're talking about Jermell Charlo or Tim Tszyu. I don't see him fighting Jerron Ennis. I just think Terence Bud Crawford probably believes that he doesn't have much to offer him. He would be, right now a little bit too dangerous for his own good. And that doesn't mean that Terence Bud Crawford is necessarily ducking him. It just means that there's other stuff to attend to. At the moment, Jerron Ennis has no belt. He's a guy that is a completely generation below Terence Bud Crawford. He's a guy that is way younger than him at the end of the day. And on top of that, Terence Bud Crawford wants to try and get belts. He wants to try and get accomplishments. He does not want to fight a guy that at the moment would not only possibly be a true 50-50 level fight, but might take years off of his career and might possibly risk his opportunity to get the unification belts with Jermell Charlo or Tim Tszyu. So I just don't see it happening. And I don't blame Terence Bud Crawford for that because he's not the only fighter that has ever had that mentality. And I can't blame him. Jermell Charlo right now is looked at as a top 10 pound-for-pound fighter. Tim Tszyu is going to be one of the top contenders there, and I believe he now has one of the belts. So I don't blame Terence Crawford for going for those fights. Do I also think the Gervonta Tank Davis fight is likely to happen? I think that that fight, even before I talked about it, had about a 0.0001% chance of happening. I don't think that that fight really ever had a true chance of happening.
Well, I don't see Tank moving up, to that weight class. So maybe even put that, probably at the bottom of the list and realistic.
What I tell you, what I tell you. Head of Showtime, Steven Espinoza, shut it down, shut it down.
Ego, or Ego Stradamus, as he calls himself, he cracks me up. Because Ego, and don't get me wrong, I think that he's a fairly accurate and, good logical predictor. But Ego is one of those guys that, he just predicts certain shit that pretty much almost anyone can see coming. Like he'll predict basically, when a car is on a railroad, and then he'll say, oh, something bad's about to happen, when that car, if it doesn't get off the track, and then he'll say, see, I told you, I'm psychic. It's like, no shit. Like, no one actually seen this fight actually happening between that of Gervonta Tank Davis and Terence Bud Crawford. Who actually seen this fight happening? Anyone who had a actual logical sound mind.
Yeah.
And not just because they're separate weight classes and all the other stuff, but if you know Gervonta Tank Davis's track record, there's no offense against him, but he always likes to talk a lot of shit and, try to write checks that his ass really can't cash. And not saying that he can't potentially win some of those fights, but he has not yet really stepped in the ring. And a lot of these LDBC and new media guys, they don't really talk about it, but Gervonta Tank Davis, when has he ever really called out someone and really been actually serious about getting in the ring with someone? Because he wasn't with Vasily Lomachenko, he wasn't with Devin Haney, he wasn't with Shakur Stevenson, he wasn't with Teofimo Lopez, he wasn't with some of these other guys. He called out Josh Taylor, but we all knew that he was never serious. So it's like, who are you actually going to get in the ring with? Now, the super fight with Ryan Garcia happened, and that's great. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to start getting in the ring with real, actual contenders. Now, Ryan Garcia was a very good contender, but he's not a great boxer. He's a great athlete, and he has some great talent. But he has a lot of deficiencies. His chin is oftentimes wide open in the air. He does not have a great chin. He can be very chinny. He's a guy that does not have great defense. He does not have great head movement. And on top of that, he really didn't have that great of experience. So it just is what it is. So Gervonta Tank Davis, even though, of course, that was a fight that could have went either way, it really was in favor of Gervonta Tank Davis, like I always said it was going to be, in favor of 70-30 or 60-40. And that was the most amount of a chance that Ryan Garcia had, a 40% chance over Gervonta Tank Davis. So like I said, we'll see what Gervonta Tank Davis does next. But very interesting that the LDBC nor new media, do they ever put the same amount of pressure on Gervonta Tank Davis that they put on other fighters that they don't like? A la Lomachenko, a la Canelo Alvarez, a la Tyson Fury, all these other guys.
Steven Espinoza shut it down. Gervonta Davis, shut it down, is not fighting Terence Crawford and moving up 2 weight classes. Told you. What up, Fight World? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back.
Told you.
With some more boxing. Now, YSM Sports Media.
I predict that the sky is going to be blue tomorrow and that the grass is going to be green. If I'm right, don't be freaked out. I have a natural sixth sense.
Had an interview with Steven Espinoza of Showtime, and he had a good question. He asked Steven Espinoza, hey, Crawford just beat Errol Spence. What is the most realistic out of all the names kind of being talked about and ruminating, right? You got names like Gervonta Davis. His name is circulating. Canelo fights with Jerron Boots Ennis. And
I might do a separate video on the Canelo Alvarez situation, but I don't see the Canelo Alvarez fight really happening. If that fight ends up happening, more than likely it'll be if Canelo Alvarez loses to Jermell Charlo, or his career is pretty much done. I just don't see that fight happening while both fighters still have a little bit of value left to them. Because Canelo Alvarez, he's not going to drain himself, to 158 or to 160. He's not a guy that cares to go down there anymore. He knows that the biggest fights at the current moment in time will probably be with both Charlo brothers, and then the possible winner, if that fight even happens, between David Benavidez and Demetrius Bouboundre. So I think that's where Canelo is going to go. And whether he wins or loses those fights, I'm not quite sure how much longer I see Canelo Alvarez lasting, just because he's starting to age a little bit. But I predict more than likely he's at least going to win 2 out of his next 3 fights. He might win all 3 of them. He has a very good bet to win all 3 of them. But like I said, whoever the winner, if that fight even happens, between Demetrius Bubuandrade and David Benavidez, the Mexican Monster, whoever were to win that fight, they'd have a great chance of beating Canelo Alvarez because Canelo has lost a step.
The first thing out of Steven Espinoza's mouth answering, and this is why I like Steven Espinoza, he's very detailed. Like, you have no struggles to understand what he's saying. He speaks eloquently. He speaks clearly. First words out of his mouth is basically, and I'm paraphrasing because you guys heard it at the beginning. If you didn't, you could rewind the video. He basically says, take that Tank out the equation. That's not happening. I don't see Tank Davis moving up to face Terence Crawford. So put that.
Why, if you're Steven Espinoza or if you're one of these guys from the PBC, why on earth would you want Gervonta Tank Davis to fight that of Terence Bud Crawford at the current moment in time? That would be almost the worst possible thing that you could actually do, because there's no way that Gervonta Tank Davis is actually going to beat that of Terence Bud Crawford. Gervonta Tank Davis, when you talk about all these up-and-coming new youngins, and you talk about Ryan Garcia, Gervonta Tank Davis, Shakur Stevenson, Teofimo Lopez, Regis Prograis, Josh Taylor, all these guys that are a part of that equation, or whoever the hell else, you put in that equation. Gervonta Tank Davis, hands down, is the biggest star out of all of those guys. There's no way that they're going to risk that star power by putting him basically in a suicide mission, unless Gervonta Tank Davis really begged for it and he said, I'm leaving your company, unless, this happens. I just don't see it. And I don't see Gervonta Tank Davis doing that. I don't think that he would actually have an actual interest in facing Terence Bud Crawford. So like I said, I don't see why Showtime would ever do that. And I think that's why Steven Espinoza had the reaction that he did.
At the bottom of the list when it comes to realistic fights. Boom. And this is precisely what I said. First of all, Tank just fought Ryan Garcia, and neither one of them fought for a belt because it was a catchweight fight, and it outsold Terence.
And because neither of them have legitimate belts, is what it is. Let's be real about it. Like I said, many of these people, they like to call Gervonta Tank Davis a legitimate 3-weight division champion. He is not. Like I said, the only belt that he's ever won legitimately was at 130 against Jose Pedraza. Once again, I don't care who you are. If you do not have one of the legitimate titles at the weight division, in my view, you are not a legitimate champion. Period.
Crawford and Errol Spence, which was for all the belts in the welterweight division, and what I thought was a fight that would actually do better on pay-per-view than it did. It did like 650 to 700,000 pay-per-view buys, so that's nothing.
I was actually a little bit surprised. I thought that it was going to do a little bit more. Now, of course, Terence Bud Crawford has never really done that great at pay-per-view numbers. And Errol Spence, it's not like he was ever, the creme de la creme of pay-per-view numbers, but he got around 250K to 300K. I thought that this fight was going to do at least anywhere from 850,000 to 1 million pay-per-view buys. But of course, one may say that there's a lot of people that are able to get it through live streaming and other stuff like that. So there might be a way for certain people to figure out for it to get lower. However, one could also come back and say that Gervonta Tank Davis versus Ryan Garcia this year, when it happened, I believe it had over 1 million pay-per-view buys, or somewhere around there. I believe it had more pay-per-view buys than Crawford versus Spence. So,
thing to sneeze at, but at the same time, everybody said they wanted to see the fight, but it doesn't look like everybody actually paid for the fight. Meanwhile, Tank Davis just fought Ryan Garcia, a guy who's never been a champion, and he outsold it. And they both collectively sold over.
I will say that, and Gervonta Tank Davis is clearly the new up-and-coming face of boxing if he can continue his reign as a great fighter, and especially keep that undefeated streak, or at least beat some of the other top guys out there. But, that fight also was partially made because of Ryan Garcia. And the reason why I have to say that is because a lot of these guys tried to say that Gervonta Tank Davis was the lone factor, and that's not true. Because at every other pay-per-view in Gervonta Tank Davis's career, I don't think he ever did over 300,000 pay-per-view buys. So that was needed to be stated. Now, of course, those are still better numbers than Errol Spence and Terence Bud Crawford. But the reason why I needed to state that is because these guys tried to allege that Gervonta already surpassed Canelo Alvarez as the face of boxing even a few years ago. And, not to nitpick or anything, but when you talk about the face of boxing, All that means is who's the most popular. Right now, Canelo Alvarez, he still has, that title as the face of boxing, but it is in slight decline. So unless Canelo Alvarez, unless he beats Jermell Charlo and beats probably more than likely Jermall Charlo next, he's not going to retain his title.
For $1 million. So as I stated, Gervonta Davis, he would be the A side over Terence Crawford. That being said,
well, I understand where you're coming from, Ego, but I think we also have to take a look at other at other avenues as well, or other factors. There's no way that Terence Bud Crawford is going to accept lesser money against Gervonta Tank Davis when he is the one that is the undisputed champion at 147. I just don't see that happening unless Terence Bud Crawford says, you know what, I'll take less money because I really want to give this dude an ass whooping. And it's possible because Terence is a guy that, he just loves kicking ass.
Terence Crawford will probably feel something else because he's Terence Crawford and he feels he's earned it. But that's not how the business works. So at the end of the day, based on the actual butts and seats and stats and things that actually make the A side, it would be Gervonta Davis.
Well, when you compare weight divisions, absolutely Gervonta Tank Davis is the A side. But when you talk about, if that fight were to actually get made, I just don't see how Gervonta Tank Davis would legitimately be able to debate A-side money unless Terence was really able, to kind of do that. But I'm not sure if he's going to be able to do that at this point in time in his career because I don't think Terence Bud Crawford, I don't think that he's really worried about Gervonta Tank Davis. I don't think it's really on his mind. I think that if he were to accept it, he'd be like, yeah, okay, I'll do it as kind of a little bit of an exhibition. I'll kick his ass. And then I'll move on. But I don't think Terence is seriously thinking about it.
But to ask you, why would the A side give up so much ground and meet the B side in the equation? And that's not a shot at Terence Crawford. It's just in the fight, there's an A side and there's a B side. And it's usually pretty easy to distinguish who it was. I mean, even Floyd Mayweather versus Manny Pacquiao. It's up to my promoter, I believe, That was easy to tell who was the A side. Pacquiao did very, very well for.
Yes, it was easy to tell who was the A side, Mr. Eagle, but the difference between that fight and this possible fight, which really isn't going to happen anyway, in my view, because I'm psychic, I can tell. But, anyway, when it comes down to it, the difference between that fight is that Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather Jr. were both fighting at the same weight division. So besides the money, it was pretty much looked at on even terms. The problem is that Terence Bud Crawford just recently became the undisputed champion of the world. And on many people's lists, including my own, he just recently became more than likely the undisputed #1 pound-for-pound fighter. On my list right now, he is. With Inoue coming in at a relatively close second, or, someone else up there like Fury or Usyk or, someone else like that. Canelo, maybe you could still have him there. One of those fighters, But when it comes down to it, I just don't see that happening because at the end of the day, even if Gervonta wanted to get in the ring with Devin Haney, if he wanted to debate A-side level money, even though I would probably give it to Gervonta Tank Davis, one could debate that Devin Haney, could debate that or want that because he's the complete undisputed champion. Like I said, Gervonta, in terms of star power, no doubt about it that he is the clear A-side, over a lot of these other fighters. But this is a fight where he would have to move up 2 weight divisions, or there would have to be a possible catch weight. Do I see Terence Bud Crawford doing that? More than likely, no. And some other certain, categories as well. Also very interesting. Boxing Ego is mentioning this, but isn't it interesting that Dante's Boxing Nation and Aki TV, that they were saying that Vasily Lomachenko should fight Terence Bud Crawford and that he can fight him at 140, even though they knew damn well that Lomachenko probably was a natural 130 pounder. But of course, according to their narrative, Lomachenko, he rehydrates, at 140 or 150, right? But you have to subtract that by about 15 pounds. Lomachenko is a guy that rehydrates at around 141 to 145. He might rehydrate a little bit higher now that he's eaten more at the 135-pound weight division, but he's not a natural 135 pounder. They wanted Lomachenko to fight Manny Pacquiao and Terence Bud Crawford. Not hearing any words about Gervonta Tank Davis going up to fight Errol Spence Jr. or Terence Bud Crawford. Isn't that peculiar?
Herself. And
isn't it also very peculiar that Jermell Charlo allegedly is more skilled than Canelo Alvarez, but that he's moving up against Canelo Alvarez they're not saying the same standards when they were saying that Lomachenko needs to fight Terence Bud Crawford to prove who is the actual number one pound for pound fighter, because weight is only an excuse. And when it comes down to it, that we need to see their skills against actually each other, because they're only 2 weight classes apart. Remember that dumbass point? Isn't it interesting that they're not giving the same excuse to Gervonta Davis or Jermell Charlo? Isn't that very interesting?
Own name, and he wasn't A-side over Floyd. He didn't have the same record. He didn't have as many hits as Floyd. He didn't do, as well as Floyd did on the pay-per-view circuit, et cetera, et cetera. So that was at least close, though. Gervonta Davis, I don't think is that close in terms of star power, right? You could put Gervonta Davis in any arena, not just in Baltimore, and he's selling. Terence Crawford has shown the great ability to get people from his city to move, like the Omaha Parade and going to the CenturyLink, the Shy Health Center, whatever it's called now, and getting his community out.
Let me also commentate on this, because I've seen some idiot, I believe, on a boxing thing, and I'm from Omaha, Nebraska myself, so there was this one person. I'm not sure if maybe I just didn't read it all or I took it the wrong way. I'm not quite sure. But there was one person, because the Omaha Parade, once again, which is my hometown of Omaha, Nebraska, there was these people that were complaining about, oh, why did they hold the parade in downtown Omaha? It should have been in North Omaha, because that's where Terence Bud Crawford is from when it comes down to it. And he was always repping North Omaha, not downtown Omaha. All that bullshit when it came to, well, first of all, I've never heard Terence Bud Crawford say that he purely was just repping North Omaha. And second of all, for those of you that know anything about the Omaha area, North Omaha is basically a shithole. For those of you that don't know, North Omaha has statistically been the worst place for that of black men, especially with that of homicidal murders and other crimes. When it comes down to it, when it comes to that of violence and other shit like that, why the hell would you want to hold your parade in that shithole? It just is what it is. And that's not me saying that downtown Omaha is much better or it's super great. But this shit has got to stop with a certain amount of these people. Let's be real, especially a certain amount of these Latinos or a certain amount of these black American guys that always want to rep for the hood or rep for these other pieces of shit. Or not even just them, but Nate Diaz and Nick Diaz wanting to rep for Stockton. All this shit has got to stop. If you want to better your life, you get out of that shithole. And that's why Terence Bud Crawford, I believe, eventually he moved to West Omaha, which is more of the better part of town. It just is what it is, because that's what you do when you want to improve your life. I've never been impressed with any of these dudes, that say, oh, I rep for the hood and I rep for this. And you know what happens to the majority of those fighters? They're usually losers. They're usually losers. When it comes to Mike Tyson, he usually lost the biggest amount of fights in his career. Zab Judah, Adrian Broner, Nate Diaz, Nick Diaz. What do you notice about all those guys? All those guys have very low self-realization. They have very low insecurities about themselves usually. They have a lot of mental issues, and they're usually losers. And whenever they end up losing a fight, they make a ton of excuses. And hopefully Gervonta Davis has eventually grew out of that mold, because we all know that he's been in trouble multiple times and that he comes from Baltimore. So hopefully he gets out of that mold as well.
That's dope, but that's at home. It's like 50 Cent said to Jada Kiss and Fat Joe. He said, love your vocals, but that's only in New York. Your ass is local, right? Gervonta Davis is not local. You can put him in Vegas with Ryan Garcia. He did over $1 million. You put him in the Barclay. He set a Barclay record for boxing events with Rolly Romero, right? So, again, fast forward to the subject of this video, Terence Crawford wouldn't be the A-side over Gervonta Davis. So why would Gervonta Davis move up 12 pounds to go see him instead of, and he's a lightweight? It just doesn't.
Well, Gervonta Davis wouldn't do that. That's why I'm saying it wouldn't make any sense. It wouldn't be good for Gervonta Davis. It wouldn't be good for the PBC. Why the hell would you want to put Terence Bud Crawford, who's going to turn 36 years old next month, against a dude that is going to be debatably the face of boxing after Canelo Alvarez leaves and a certain amount of these other guys leave? He has the possible debate of being the next, pound for pound fighter, at least in terms of revenue. And also later on, who knows, the potential number one pound for pound fighter in the world. He does have exceptional talent. But why the hell would you want to put him in the ring with the guy who's a 36-year-old fighter, possibly might fuck up his whole entire career? Excuse me, if that fight were to happen. Like, why would you want to do that? It just makes no sense to me. And then on top of that, I just don't see how the negotiations would go. There's no way that Terence Crawford more than likely is going down in weight. He don't give a shit about that fight.
Doesn't make sense. And then you get dummy boxing fans who talk about, oh, Sugar Shane Mosley moved up 2 weight classes and took 2 tune-ups and then fought De La Hoya. Or Pacquiao jumped up and fought De La Hoya. Great for them. But we're in a different time and everybody has their own career. There's fighters, like, people expect boxing to not have evolved over the past 50, 100 years or whatever, right? Like Ray Robinson, there was times where he fought.
He said 50, 100 years. Well, listen, Oscar De La Hoya and Shane Mosley and Pacquiao, those guys weren't that long ago. When Sugar Shane Mosley went up and fought De La Hoya, that was probably like 25 years ago. When we talk about Pacquiao against De La Hoya, that was probably around 15, 11 yeyears ago. I don't really remember how long ago it was. Now, to be fair, De La Hoya was drained, but it is what it is. I don't think that it would be fair to say that Gervonta Tank Davis has to step in the ring with Terence Bud Crawford. I've never been a guy that says that you have to step up within 2 weight classes. But like I said, isn't it very interesting that the LDBC, new media, especially Dante and Aki TV, isn't it very interesting when Lomachenko was the #1 pound-for-pound guy? They said, Lomachenko, if he really is that good, he should go up and fight Manny Pacquiao or Terence Bud Crawford. He's avoiding those guys. But if you put Gervonta Tank Davis in the ring with Terence Bud Crawford or Jamel Charlo in the ring with, Canelo Alvarez, they're moving up 2 weight classes. All of a sudden now it's a valid excuse. Isn't that interesting? That's why I always say, don't come at me with this bullshit about, Dante and Aki TV, you're wrong about them. They don't have an issue with anybody. They're just telling the truth and you don't like it. All they're for is their pro-black agenda. I'm not here to overall fuck with this bullshit. It just is what it is. Yes, I reviewed their videos in order to expose certain narratives and talk about certain subjects. But don't sit here and tell me that they're objective and logical commentators. I know what they're about. And anyone who has a brain cell knows what they're about.
2 times back-to-back within 2 weeks of each other, right? Things like that. No one at the elite level, this is considered the greatest fighter of all time, Sugar Ray Robinson, and he's fighting multiple times in a month. No one does that. There's no elite fighter in modern boxing that's fighting multiple times in a month. But that's what he did back in his day.
Right, Mr. Eagle, I understand what you're saying, but it's not uncommon of fighters to move up 1 or 2 weight classes today. At least not as uncommon as what Sugar Ray Robinson used to do. What Sugar Ray Robinson used to do, nobody does anymore. Like, he would fight, 10 guys in 1 month, but, 9 or 10 of those guys would be complete bums of the month. Just is what it is.
To each his own. Just like they have 15 rounders. Now we don't see 15 rounders in U.S. boxing, right? So that being said, Tank's the A side. It was foolish. Steven Espinoza shut it down. It's over. And I think it's kind of a bad look for Crawford to keep mentioning in radio interviews the Tank fight, or I don't know if he's mentioned it because I haven't.
Right, but come on, Mr. Ego, and that shows that you did not do your proper research or that you're being a little bit disingenuous. And we all know that you don't like Terence Bud Crawford that much because you have a little bit of a personal issue with him. He even admitted that. All right, you can see it in 1 or 2 of my videos, I believe. So when it comes down to it, let's be real. Terence was asked a question, just like Gervonta Tank Davis was asked a question. And if we're talking about who had the better response, Terence was the one who had the more mature response. Because Gervonta Tank Davis, like I said, he loves to talk a lot for really accomplishing nothing in his career.
Watch all of
or at least fighting anyone that is truly elite.
them. So I don't know if he's bringing it up or if the radio hosts are bringing it up, but it doesn't matter because there's still an etiquette and a way for you to shut down conversations. And I think Crawford...
Right, so then why don't we talk about Gervonta Tank Davis, about, him disrespecting Terence Bud Crawford and saying, I would knock him out, basically when he doesn't even have the guts or the gall to go up and fight Josh Taylor or Regis Prograis. Why don't we talk about that?
Knows that because if people ask Crawford, hey, what was the holdup of you and Errol? What took so long to get here? And he shut those questions down. So there's a way to shut down if you don't think it's realistic. So I don't know if Terence...
Right, but Terence Bud Crawford really isn't the one that started this war. At the end of the day, Gervonta Tank Davis was the one who first kind of responded. One could say a little bit out of pocket. Terence Bud Crawford responded.
Crawford really thinks that a Gervonta Davis fight is realistic. I know he thinks it's a big money fight. Tank versus anyone is a big money fight. But again, when you're dealing with A side, B side, it doesn't make sense for the A side to jump up 2 weight classes. Furthermore, you got old media, and they were pressed when Floyd Mayweather said Inoue should jump up to a catch weight to fight Gervonta Davis. Gervonta Davis would actually be the A side over Inoue because Inoue is popular in Japan. That's similar to Crawford being popular in Omaha.
Inoue should go up at a catch weight and fight Gervonta Davis. Dude, Gervonta Davis is a guy that is a natural 135 pounder when it comes down to it. And on top of that, he's a tremendous athlete. Inoue has never even fought at 130 before. He's never even fought at 126. Like why the fuck would you want Inoue to go up? And there's no offense against Floyd Mayweather Jr. You know, I like Floyd. A lot of the shit that he has to say I think is very intelligent. But there's certain shit in my view that he says where it's just like what the fuck are you talking about? Like, you want Inoue to go at a catchweight to fight Gervonta Davis? Like, he's never even fought at 126 before, dude. What the hell are you talking about?
But worldwide and, you know, in different markets and regions, Gervonta Davis is that dude, you know? And when Floyd mentioned that, old media lost their mind. But the same people that lost their mind, oh, how could you say this? Inoue's too small and this and that. They're pumping this up and advocating for Tank, the A side, to jump up.
Well, who the hell is a part of old media that is really advocating this? Who on old media is really advocating this? The only ones that would really be advocating this is Terence Crawford fans, more than likely, because they would probably just want to see Gervonta Davis getting his ass kicked. Who really from old media recently have I heard say, yeah, put Gervonta Davis in the ring with Terence Crawford? I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just not looking at enough comments. Maybe those types of people just aren't on my channel. I've never seen them. Just my personal view, but maybe I'm wrong.
Fight Crawford. So I'm glad Steven Espinoza weighed in and pretty much shut that down, that's not going to be the case. And listen, I've done this here YouTube thing for quite a while, and I don't have to nickel and dime y'all. Like, I've seen people conversating, and it's so funny.
Well, that's not always true, that you don't have to nickel and dime people. At the end of the day, you are a part of the LDBC and no media narrative, so you will try to nickel and dime people, at least lie, or overall put certain narratives out there about certain things, or have double standards, depending on the fighter that you like, especially when it comes to Deontay Wilder, Errol Spence Jr., Gervonta Davis, or one of the other fighters that you tend to like, or when there's a fighter that you don't like Canelo, Lomachenko, Tyson Fury, or someone else like that.
I just put out a tweet about this before these interviews even came.
Actually, you know, it's interesting. Wasn't Boxing Ego the same one that said that if Canelo Alvarez was going to go up to cruiserweight, that he should fight Alexander Usyk? You know, Alexander Usyk, the same guy that defeated Anthony Joshua at heavyweight. Alexander Usyk, the same guy that's one of the top fighters in the world. Isn't it interesting that all of a sudden he doesn't have the same energy with Gervonta Davis? Once again, this goes to show you that these guys can say whatever they want about Canelo Alvarez. This is why I called it the Floyd Mayweather Jr. effect, because it was the same thing with Floyd Mayweather Jr. You know, it's almost kind of like the same thing with Michael Jordan, where LeBron James fans, whenever you hear them argue, about Michael Jordan, they're like, well, if Michael Jordan, couldn't make it, how was he the greatest of all time when he couldn't make 10 finals in a row? Knowing damn well that LeBron James made 10 finals in a row overall, or 9 finals in a row, however many he made, because the East was pretty much whack juice. It just is what it is. And don't get me wrong, he beat some decent teams, but there's a reason why he's 4-6 in the NBA Finals. It just is what it is. Or it comes to Floyd Mayweather, like when people say, well, Floyd is so great, why doesn't he fight Gennady Golovkin in 160 or Sergio Martinez? Why doesn't he fight this guy? Why doesn't he fight that guy? It's always an excuse. And the same thing happened with the LDBC and new media with Canelo Alvarez, because they know how great Canelo Alvarez actually is.
Came out, and I was like, I see everything, I hear everything in boxing, I know what's going on in boxing, this is my sport. So at the end of the day, I know what is happening. If you don't see me talking about something or overly talking about something, there's usually a reason, because I don't care. And that's one of these situations. The only reason I'm talking about it is there's updated thoughts from Steven Espinoza shutting it down and proving me right. That's why I'm talking about it. You didn't see me using my channel.
Right, but what idiot was actually thinking, what person with a logical mind was actually thinking that this fight was actually going to happen?
On my platform to overly clickbait y'all on something I know that's not going to happen, like Terence Crawford versus Gervonta Davis at this moment. Him jumping up 2 weight classes. Yeah, it happened.
The fight is not going to happen ever. the fight is not going to happen ever. And the reason why is because, once again, Gervonta Tank Davis is a 135 pounder. He's never even fought an elite 140 pounder before when it comes down to it. And on top of that, Terence is 36 years old, man. He's not fucking around with that fight. He's not looking at Gervonta Tank Davis. He's trying to fight Jermell Charlo, Tim Tszyu, maybe Errol Spence in a rematch, and he's done.
Sometimes Charlo is jumping up 14 pounds to fight Canelo Alvarez, but he also called out Canelo Alvarez in a recent Instagram live, and he's technically bigger than Canelo in terms of frame. Terence Crawford just said that Tank Davis is 5'5".
So Terence Bud Crawford is technically bigger than Canelo Alvarez in terms of frame. Mr. Ego, where are these same standards with Jermell Charlo and Canelo Alvarez? Once again, I don't mind consistent standards, but don't sit here and tell me about all this bullshit when it comes down to it about, oh, well, Terence is bigger than Canelo Alvarez, but Jermell Charlo is even bigger than Terence Bud Crawford. So come on, man. Let's not do this. We got to keep the same standards everywhere. Now, I understand. According to Ego, he's saying that if Terence is calling out Gervonta Tank Davis, then Canelo and Crawford, that probably wouldn't work out either. But I mean, if you actually believe that Crawford actually called out Canelo Alvarez, wouldn't that be more admirable than Gervonta Tank Davis talking shit on Crawford? But of course, Ego, I don't think he knows that Gervonta Tank Davis kind of talked a little bit of shit on Terence Bud Crawford, but both of them were asked a question.
So it's like, you're saying the Boots fight doesn't make sense and it's a lose-lose situation, but you're saying Tank is too small, and you're saying you wouldn't get credit for fighting Boots, but then you want to fight the guy that you just said was 5'5", and he's 2 divisions below you because it's a big money fight. So that's not a good look, in my opinion, when Crawford said that. Boots is your size in your division, and you say it's lose-lose, and he's available, and it's more of a realistic fight. You answering podcast or radio show questions about Tank Davis was never really realistic. And again, I can click.
Well, how realistic was it when Gervonta Tank Davis said that he was going to knock out Terence Bud Crawford? So why don't we once again keep the same standards?
You for the cash and just make a bunch of videos, but that's not my passion. It's not my passion to make a bunch of time waster videos that I know are time wasters. Anybody else, they could do whatever they want on their channels. But for me, I don't like to waste my time because my time is money. And I know there's some go-getters out there that are part of Ego's army, and y'all don't like y'all time wasted. So everything considered, it just didn't really make sense for me to push this line about some stuff with Terence Crawford and Tank because it was clickbaity and, these sound bites. I'm not moved by that. I'm doing different stuff in boxing. I don't follow the trends. I set the trends. And that's just what it is.
No, you don't follow the trends unless it's talking shit on a fighter that you don't like.
So I'm glad Steven Espinoza weighed in on it and deaded it. Mayweather Promotions also put out a tweet and pretty much deaded it. Like, this is not happening. So, if Crawford continues to talk about Tank Davis, it's really a non-issue because it doesn't look like the fight's going to happen. So I'd rather see Crawford just move on with something that's more realistic. Boots, Stanionis, maybe if he's moving up, fight Tim Tszyu. These are all great fights. Holla at me about something like that. Hit him up.
Watch 100 plus channels of live TV.
But anyways, that's pretty much about it for today. I just thought that I would talk about that because I wasn't really going to talk about it either. Because anyone overall with the brain knew that this fight was not going to happen. Just is what it is. But anyways, very interesting conversation. I just thought that I would talk about that. But Terence Bud Crawford, do I see him fighting Gervonta Tank Davis? I think that, once again, the chance of it happening is almost very much near zero. I think that more than likely he's going to have to go after Jermell Charlo. That seems to be his main target. Now, he could go after Errol Spence Jr. in a rematch. I don't think Terence Bud Crawford personally cares for that rematch. I wouldn't either. I think he's focusing on Tim Tszyu and also that of Jermell Charlo. So, once again, very, very, very interesting fights ahead of Terence Bud Crawford. I don't think he's really interested in Jerome Butsenis. I can't really blame him. If he does fight again at the welterweight division, in my view, it'll be Keith One-Time Thurman or Errol Spence Jr. in the rematch. But we'll see. It'll be very interesting. But anyways, that's pretty much about it for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later. And we'll see what happens with both of these guys' careers. But once again, as for Gervonta Tank Davis, before he starts talking and doing all this yapping, and I get it, he's from Baltimore. He's not from the greatest of places. But at the end of the day, he's got to learn to shut his goddamn mouth at times, because one of these days, he's gonna, write a check overall that his ass definitely ain't gonna be able to cash. And he definitely will not beat Terence Crawford. He wouldn't even be able to reach Terence Crawford. Terence Crawford will have a 7-8 reach advantage over Gervonta Tank Davis. So it is what it is. Anyways, that's pretty much about it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see what happens.